It is Wednesday. RawMikeRichards.com. Broadcasting from the DKI studios in downtown Toronto, 234 King Street East. Now, we've got a kind of a scary show. Oh, hey, kids, it's going to be scary.
You're not supposed to laugh when it's
yeah,
scary.
I know. Ooh.
Okay, now.
All right, kids, it's going to be a real scary show. We're going to talk to Kelly Michael Stewart. He is the founder and the director for a really cool film festival. I know if you like the horror genre, gore, I know I do.
Yep.
You know when they have Scarefest because it's Halloween week, and so on AMC,
yes,
they'll start now with
absolutely. Like everything will be coming out soon.
Michael Myers.
They'll probably have a back to back as well, right? It
started this week.
Okay.
So for a whole week, every day, there's like that whole series. So you've got Halloween, Child's Play. You know, Chucky.
Yep.
They've got a
John Gruden's story, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, it kind of ended up a little scary too when you think about it. His team was scary, and so they've got this Blood in the Snow. It's called the Blood in the Snow Canadian Film Festival, and the history of Canadian directors in that genre. It's probably a lot bigger than you think. There is a real history of Canadian filmmakers and Canadian films that maybe you don't, off the top of your head, think maybe necessarily Canadian, but we'll talk to Kelly about that, Kelly Michael Stewart, about just what the festival is. By the way, it is November the 23rd to the 26th, and it has seminars, shorts, and then, of course, this is the 6th year, actually, of this Canadian genre in cinema. So we're thrilled to have them because we know, kind of like Comic-Con or, look, I'll even say guys who like wrestling. You don't just like it. You love it.
Exactly.
And you know the history of it. And if it's available, you're either going to watch it, go to it. Like, for the most part, if you like WWE and going back to all the different variations of it, whether it's WWF and Nitro and all the way back,
sure,
you go to the shows. Like, I think most people, if you're a wrestling fan, the thing that you like doing, I mean, obviously you're going to watch it on television, but really wrestling fans, they go to the event. And that's why they're so goddamn successful. That's why they make so much money.
Yeah.
Because people are going. This is kind of similar. Like I said, like the Comic-Con. Like, if you like that kind of stuff, you love this kind of stuff. So, tickets go on sale. But we'll talk more about the festival itself and the festival director, Kelly Michael Stewart. And there's like 10 screenings over that week. So actually, like 4 days. So there's lots to see. So I'm thrilled to have them on. It's gonna be great. Also, speaking of great, there was a time where people used to talk about Clayton Kershaw, and they're like, too bad in the playoff, he sucks. Now, by the way, he kind of rendered that. This is not the first year we've seen this, but you look at a performance like he had last night, and you say to yourself, are we looking at someone right now that we're saying is a Hall of Famer? He's in the Hall of Fame when he's done?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. He's going to go down as, especially now that he's having the success he's having here in the postseason, because there was a time, just like you said, I remember on a previous show we did, I used to call him Mr. July because he was...
Once again, that's sarcasm.
Yeah, it was great in the regular season, and then when it comes to the playoffs, yeah. So I think he's the best left-hander in the game right now. I think eventually once he does retire, and don't get me wrong, we're not talking about his retirements coming up in the next year or two. I'm just saying that down the line, he'll go down as this generation's best left-handed starting pitcher. And definitely a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer.
I've never understood the dominating athlete of his sport that disappears when it's the most important. I've never understood that guy, Dave. Mm-hmm. Because when you think about it, is it really just the nerves and the sort of point of no return in a playoff format, depending on the sport that you're in, that somehow all of a sudden you're not able to perform like you did for the previous, give or take, 6 months of a given sport? I mean, and there are guys who are kind of like that. There are guys who have, for instance, basketball. What's the joke? Why can't Blake Griffin give you change for $1? Because he doesn't have 4 quarters. You know. Yeah. It's like, why? Because the think about it. If you love to play sports, when is it the best? It's the best when all the chips are down. And when all the chips are down, are you the kind of guy who wants the puck? You want the ball. You know, as I said, when you play goal, my thing was, I'd love to get a breakaway right now. I wouldn't mind seeing a breakaway, or they can pepper me with shots. I want to be in it. I don't want to be an observer. You know, you want to be Michael Jordan. You want to be the guy that, when it comes down to it, or whatever quarterback you see in the 2-minute drill. Are you Joe Montana? Are you Tom Brady? Who are you? But the guy that disappears, like sometimes I think even unfairly. But do you think Joe Thornton has broken that image? Do you think people think of him that way still? Does he have that? Because for a while, he did have that stigma, and I think the stigma was a little unfair. If I go back to that series way back in I think 2001, 2002, when Boston, that first round, are playing Montreal, and they get bounced. But at that point, people didn't realize that Joe Thornton was so banged up, hips and everything else, he could barely bend down to tie his skates on. And then he was seen as this guy who disappears during the playoffs. And for a while, San Jose, let's be honest, as a team, Dave, I think there was 10 years where San Jose was like the sexy pick, and they never came through. But let's be honest, if you saw what was going on in the West, it's a little unfair to say, they should come through and win a Stanley Cup. Good luck with that in the West.
San Jose was the Washington Capitals before the Washington Capitals became the Washington Capitals,
exactly.
If that makes sense.
That's exactly what – no, it is.
Kind of connecting the dots of regular season greatness, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, where'd you go? Where'd you go? We thought you were going to, you were going to be playing hockey into June. I think there was a long time where Joe Thornton was thought of that. I think that has left him, but the stench is still there. The smell is still around. Probably some people, not with me anymore.
Right. I don't think so either.
I really don't think so. And is it a guy I'd love to see in the dressing room? Yeah. From a non-Leafs fan that I am, when they were talking about Patrick Marleau, guess who the other link was? Joe Thornton was going to come to the Toronto Maple Leafs too. And I think that package deal would have been tremendous if that would have actually happened. Could you imagine those two playing on the Maple Leafs second or third line, and just kind of being in that dressing room, having that circumstance? I think that would have been definitely a push to the next step, because the Leafs are doing what they're doing with the roster they have right now. But you add a Joe Thornton and you move people down. I mean, honestly, a Tyler Bozak would become a fourth-line center on this team if Joe Thornton was playing center for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But that didn't happen, and he's happy in San Jose. He has a pretty good lifestyle in San Jose.
Oh, everyone would have a good lifestyle in San Jose.
I was going to say, I think a lot of that had to do with that sort of when you're thinking about making the decision and what kind of decision you're going to make, Thornton was probably thinking more of that than anything else.
Interesting when I hear conversations about the biggest chokers in professional sport, because that's the worst, I think, handle. That is the worst thing that you could have on your mantle, is a guy who chokes. And, it's interesting for what he has done in the sport and for what I think his talent level was. And you can go through all the things that were really almost groundbreaking with Alexander Ovechkin, including the way in which he handled his own contracts. He's a guy who marched to his own drummer, and yet I'm seeing him thrown in that category of a choker when it comes to playoffs. And when you look at that team in Washington, as you said, the current team that you don't have faith in, you have to put him on that list. Just like most of the time I looked at the Atlanta Falcons, and every time we did, what was it, believe or not believe, for 3 years in a row, the champion was the Atlanta Falcons. Last year, they finally get a run, and guess what happens? They choke at the most inopportune times. They can't get anything done in basically the last 17 minutes of that football game, the biggest football game you'll probably ever play in your life. And now, historically, you look like you are the big chokers, and that means you put a Matt Ryan Is Matt Ryan in the category of choke?
Yes. Yes,
because it's hard to avoid that.
It's hard to avoid. You know what? And there's been a history of very good players, MVP type players, being chokers. I think the most recent one, that Super Bowl. I mean, you can almost pinpoint a time in the game where if he converts a first down, the clock continues to tick, and the Patriots don't have a chance to actually make that miracle comeback. But you know what? He's part of a long line. Okay, agree or disagree with me. I'll throw some names out there traditionally.
Okay, let's have some
of traditional chokers.
Let's have some music that
yep.
Dramatic choking.
Dramatic choking. Okay. So these are very good players, in some cases Hall of Famers, that in the biggest time, in the biggest stage, have had a reputation or have kind of failed in the process. And the first one I'll give you is Barry Bonds, because there was a time where Barry Bonds struggled, and Barry Bonds was 0 for a series, 0 for something with the Giants, and during the regular season, he was basically the greatest player in Major League Baseball.
Well, the real problem with when you throw that adjective choking, you're talking about some substantial players. So if your record says what it is, it's hard to argue against it. What if someone said to you, okay, well, so in the biggest moments you don't win, and yet you're a Hall of Fame guy? Dan Marino.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that almost makes me throw up a little bit in the back of my mouth, even saying that Dan Marino is a choker, because people would lose their minds at that statement.
I'll match your Dan Marino with Jim Kelly. 4 consecutive Super Bowls. I know he's not.
I'm glad Marv Levy's not here, because he'd fight us both, and I think he still can,
and he'd win. But the thing is, no, he wouldn't. So the thing is, 4 Super Bowls. I know he's not a kicker, but you have to think that eventually that type of player during the regular season has to win a major championship when you're given that sort of, opportunity, chance. Everything on the line, 4 consecutive years. Charles Barkley's another one. I think Patrick Ewing's another one for the New York Knicks. The Knicks were in championship finals where they got blasted by the Houston Rockets. That was terrible. John Stockton is another one. But then when you look at it, it's like, well, if you can say John Stockton, you got to say Karl Malone as well, because guess what? Where there was one, there was quickly the other one.
There's a lot of guys that all of a sudden, certain towns that we can't go to.
No, I know.
After
I don't want to even say Tony Romo, but Tony Romo.
I mean, and you know what?
Hold a snap.
Yeah.
Hold a snap from a center for your kicker, and don't boggle it. And maybe we're not talking about you today.
You know, the problem is they're sitting there around a card table, and you have all these guys, and there's others who want to point fingers, and they start saying, "Well, I did this, and they'll go, "What'd you win?" But what did you win?
Bingo. Yeah. And Alex Ovechkin is the NHL equivalent to all those great athletes that we talked about throughout the different sports.
That's why people also too at times would say, well, if you have Curtis Joseph on your team, you're not going to win.
Honestly, you're right.
And that's like, he was so popular. And look, I'm a huge Curtis Joseph fan. Like, I just like what this guy does. I think he's not only a goaltender that is, was upper echelon, but he's a great human being. And yet, people would say, where's the hardware? Where's the trophies?
Mm-hmm. Bingo.
That's really hard. Who's going to get a trophy when it comes to Major League Baseball? Well, I'll tell you what. I've always said that you need to be big when it is the biggest stage at the biggest time. That's just basically what we talked about. So the opposite then. What about a guy who in 2013 is playing for the Mets?
Yep.
And he is, and honestly, the word that I've seen the most often is cast off.
Yeah.
Cast off.
He was.
It's not a good guy. Just like, hey, here comes Justin Turner. Yeah, about that, Justin.
You're a cast off.
You can't be here. I beg your pardon. No, and he just walks.
Yeah. Basically what happened, if you want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, he spent about 300 games with the New York Mets. In 2013, the team non-tendered him, which basically said, we're not signing you at all. Therefore, you are a unrestricted free agent. You're a free agent. Dodgers take a flyer on him in 2014, and now we're seeing Justin Turner, the all-star.
The greatest player of all time. apparently.
Probably a main reason, especially in the last couple of years, because there was a major rumor, I should say, that the Dodgers were interested in Josh Donaldson playing third base. But Turner has come into his own, especially in the last 2 years, that the Dodgers no longer are interested in a Josh Donaldson because they got their guy at third base.
And see, that's what happens too, where people go, well, you can't get rid of Josh Donaldson. Keep holding on to him.
Yeah.
Like, keep doing it. And
do the Joe McGinley thing in Calgary, right?
It's starting to, you know what? At some point, you get it when it's the highest value, and year after year, it doesn't get higher.
No.
So, and even that Chris Taylor, the Seattle Mariners didn't necessarily want him either.
No. He was basically told at one stage to go home because you talk about different levels. So there's the Major League squad, there's the minor league squad, and then there's in Major League Baseball they also send players to Arizona in this time of year just to stay warm, just to stay
good
active.
Life.
Yeah,
that's a good guy.
Stay in baseball shape, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we're doing right here on this show.
Sitting.
We're staying in baseball shape. He was told to leave that camp where almost everybody's invited.
He's
so,
like, you mean the sitting camp?
Yes.
Yeah, you're not.
Yeah, you don't sit well enough.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry.
You have failed sitting.
So,
and from Major League Baseball, even CC Sabathia over there.
Yeah.
He's doing an awesome job sitting. He's just like the best sitter we have.
He's been sitting for 20 consecutive years.
Yeah. The only thing that's bad is the chair. Chair's not happy about it. Okay, so let's get to some of the magic moments. Once again, Justin Turner showing that you just never know, courtesy and property of Major League Baseball and MLB Advanced Media.
High fly ball into left. Off the bat of Turner. At the wall. It's gone. Turner makes it 3-1 Dodgers in game 1.
Yes.
He looks like one of the, well, actually, we're talking about the Bushwhackers.
Yes, he could be one of them.
He could be.
He might be part of the film festival that we're going to be talking about coming up in about 5 minutes here. So
yeah, if he knocks at your door,
yeah, you're not answering this door.
Doesn't need a mask. Doesn't need a mask. So
I can pay Ryan right here.
Well, no, you can't play Ryan at all.
No.
Okay, so we're once again talking about the film festival, the Blood in the Snow Canadian Film Festival, and the history of really Canadians in this genre, probably a lot deeper than you think. So we're going to bring in Kelly Michael Stewart. He's the founder and director of the festival. Look forward to it. It's November 23rd to the 26th. So when we come back on the other side, get ready, as you can see by the skull and David Bastel's severed leg, which is why it's there. See, look at that. It's not because he's hungry. It's that we didn't weird out here. We will talk to Kelly Michael Stewart on the other side. Coming up November 23rd to the 26th, and now in studio, Here's the creepy music. I play this in my bedroom. I don't know.
Okay.
Someone's creepy, someone else is sexy. I think that's what we found out with this genre. And Kelly Michael Stewart is in. Bits is the name of the film festival. Blood in the Snow. So great to have you here, Kelly.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks a lot. It's really great.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing too. When people think about this genre, and maybe even Canadians, because we're supposed to be the kinder, gentler souls.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the more graphic and scary movies that have ever been made come from the minds of Canadians, and I don't know where maybe you draw a line in the sand necessarily, but I would think that Black Christmas probably is on that list.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a big part of our history of Canadian films. I mean, we have some pretty notable filmography of people that have. Probably the most notable one is David Cronenberg.
Oh, there's a real.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what was going. Like when I was a kid and I saw Shivers.
Yeah.
I was like, what happened in his house?
Yeah.
Why is he pulling liver-like things out of your stomach? It was unbelievable.
Yeah,
gore.
absolutely. Yeah, that and The Brood. And
The Brood was another bad one.
Yeah, I mean, there's incredible. I mean, and I think it really sent the benchmark of like how Canadian films are made, because I think it showed that you could make those kinds of films here in Canada and not have to go to Hollywood and not compromise either. So, I mean, what's great about doing horror films is that they're a little subversive, a little bit underground, and that works for an out of Hollywood formula.
Well, as we talked before, you got on the air, that very often when you talk about things like the horror genre, we even talked about it in terms of sports when you're a wrestling fan or those that would go to Comic-Con. It's not that you just kind of like that lifestyle, because it is a lifestyle.
Yeah,
it's you attend the films, you buy the paraphernalia, you go to shows, you go to screenings, you go to see the actors. It becomes part of your daily life. Therefore, even though it may not be what some would call mainstream, which now you could probably even argue that, now that you have the Walking Dead, which would have been, I think, 25 years ago, all the zombie stuff would have been laughed at, and that's why you saw those kind of campy movies, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and all that weird stuff where it was kind of funny. Now I don't think you can say that anymore. I think it's mainstream.
Oh, very much. I absolutely agree. And I think even with shows like Stranger Things, this has become a huge phenomenon. You've seen obviously the box office of It, and that's really, really big numbers on that. And I think actually of the things that are coming out of Hollywood or even on TV and stuff like that, those are the more interesting stories that are being told. And so I think there's definitely the reason. And you're right that when you look at older films like George Romero's film like Dawn of the Dead and like that, they're certainly popular, but much more in an underground kind of way.
Totally.
And then Walking Dead was basically taking the same formula and putting it in a much more mainstream audience, and it's changed everything.
So do you think the hardcore that would have been familiar with the Romero films, they know all the lines, they have these film festivals, and then they see, The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead. Are they excited that it's been elevated to a more public venue, or are they like, thanks for ripping us off? Thanks for ripping off the guys who really started it. How do they see it as fans?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but just from my general, I can only speak for myself and the people that I know, and I haven't heard any kind of negative feedback at all. I mean, I see just as much people fans of that stuff as they do for that. It's like, I think there's a bit of sense of like, finally people get it. Because there's always it's the one thing, the strange thing about horror films is it's the one genre you have to explain to people. You don't have to explain why you like it. You don't have to explain to someone why you like action movies. You don't have to explain why you like a comedy. They're like, why do you like horror movies?
Yeah.
And I think it's finally got to the point now where people don't have to explain it as much, and it's like that they can just go, oh yeah, I because now it's like, yeah, I dig that too.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of, so the dialogue for people that are the hardcore horror fans has opened up a lot more. Like that way.
Let's get into some of the history of what we're going to be seeing here later on in the month of November. This is year number 6. You're the founder of this festival. What went into it the first year where you thought, you know what, this is a good idea. I want to start this film festival. Here's how we're going to start it, and why did you decide to do it at that time?
Yeah, and it didn't happen that way at all. Because what happened, it was interesting, was and this is one of the things where just one of like cosmic energy just kind of happened to make it happen the way it did. And really, like, the films came first, because one of the questions I always get is there enough Canadian genre films to justify a film festival? And what actually happened was the films came first. So what happened in 2012, I was hosting a monthly horror night called Fright Nights at the Projection Booth Theater that used to be on Gerrard. And I used to be a film writer. I used to write for different film outlets in the city, like Toronto Film Scene, and I also write for Fangoria magazine at the time. And so I got kind of known for that a little bit.
Fangoria, that's a pretty big magazine in that format.
It's very big. Yeah. It's kind of in it's kind of in limbo right now. But my a friend of mine, Chris Alexander, was the editor of it for about 6 years, and he actually was out of Oakville. So even though the magazine's out of New York City, he was running out of Oakville, and so he brought on writers like myself that he knew. You know, you work with people you know, right? So we were brought in, and so that's why there was a huge Canadian component of that. And then Rue Morgue magazine, which is the other big horror magazine, it is out of Toronto. So those two things, we had major press out of Toronto already. Then we've had Midnight Madness and Toronto After Dark. So there was really kind of like that. There was roots in it. So I was hosting my monthly movie night and just doing my thing, and I had a bunch of filmmakers around the summertime of that year message me and go, Kelly, I need somewhere to premiere my film. It didn't get into Fantasia or Toronto After Dark. Now, those are international film festivals, so they play films from all around the world, so they can only play a certain amount of Canadian films.
Sure.
So they were getting, it wasn't like, they weren't supporting Canadian films. It's just like they're international, they got to play a bit of everything. So what happened was they would take three or four of the features, and these other great films didn't have a home. So they came to me about playing my monthly night. So at first it was going to be, okay, well, rather than play them each month, because I was just doing a monthly night, let's do it over one weekend. And I was going to call it Fright Nights Blood in the Snow Weekend, like it's a tagline.
Sure.
And someone suggested to me, well, that sounds like a film festival. And I went, okay, sure. And this is like about 10 weeks before the date of it. Wow. So I was just like, so I didn't have a volunteer team. Yeah. I didn't have it wasn't like, because now, normally the way a film festival works, you submit online to like certain sites like Film Freeway and Without a Box, and you submit your film. We have a jury that picks the films and like that. It wasn't like that at all. It was like I just had a bunch of films and I programmed them over a whole weekend, and it did extremely well. It came together very, very last minute, but we had 2 sellout screenings. We had MTV come out and interview us and stuff like that, and we had, it really became like a phenomenon, like really fast. And so before I even had a chance to even think about it, we had a film festival.
Yeah.
So it was really only in year 2, at the end of year 1, we after we finished the fest and it was a success, then all the people that kind of volunteered last minute, I mean, none of them even had real roles. They were just kind of standing in the lobby helping, like, oh, what do you need done now? Like, it was like that. Like, so we actually registered as a nonprofit. We picked a programming team. We got a bit of a small staff together, and we moved to the Carlton, and we were there for 3 years. And then we were at the Cineplex Yonge and Dundas last year, and then we moved up yet again to the Royal Cinema, which is where we're at this year.
Now, the Royal Cinema, for those are wanting to come to it in Toronto, what are we talking? What's the location of the Royal Cinema?
It's in Little Italy, near Bathurst and College.
Okay,
like that. Just so it's like that. So it's and it's kind of like the main destination for film festivals in the city.
Okay,
they're actually a post-production house during the day, and there's a huge theater, 380-seat theater that with the curtains and the whole bit, kind of thing like that. Really kind of old school. So it's a really good match for us, because that's what they do. They basically play a lot of specialty programming and a lot of film festivals, and that just fits perfectly with what we're doing.
And what are we looking at for that festival coming up? How many films are going to be part of it? And it's over the course of the 23rd of November through the 26th. Yeah, so it's
4 days.
It's going to be 4 busy days.
4 very busy days. We have so what we do is we have 10 programs over the whole weekend. 9 of them are features with a short that opens each of them.
Okay.
And then we have a shorts program. And what's cool about the shorts program is that we put that right in prime time. Because a lot of times the shorts programs get kind of put into the afternoon slot, and it's actually one of our biggest sellers. We put that on Saturday night. We do that. We also have industry, because there's a lot of filmmakers come to that. We have filmmakers come from all across Canada, right? We had filmmakers from Halifax to Victoria last year, and they come, and we have industry panels on the Thursday and Friday. The nearby Monarch Tavern, and then we have networking industry parties. We have a filmmakers breakfast, and we do that. That's the industry component of the fest.
Yeah.
And then there's the public component of it, and then we have those are the programs. And what's unique about our fest too is not only is it that it's all Canadian films, but they're just about all of them are all premieres. I think 14 of the 32 films that we're playing this year are either Canadian or world premieres. So.
Wow.
It was funny years ago. So the Dead Zone, which I think was that Cronenberg. I think it was Cronenberg,
yeah.
And in the Stephen King novel, the opening scene was at my elementary school in Stouffville, Ontario.
Yeah.
I knew kids in that opening scene, and no one had really, done a Christopher Walken impression at that point. And it kind of a lot of it came there with the hair sticking straight up. Is there a qualification? I know musically, what happens with radio stations, what it qualifies to be CanCon. Is it the same thing for what makes it a Canadian necessarily horror film?
And you know what's interesting is like that's something we've had to grapple with. In fact, one thing we did was this year is we did open it up a little bit. So actually, we can't announce the lineup yet, but two of our features are actually international directors. One's from the UK and the other one's from the US. But it was all shot in Canada with a Canadian crew, produced in Canada, like literally every single other aspect.
Because Child's Play would be that category too, is it not? Child's Play is an American movie, but I don't. Do they not shoot it up here?
Oh, there's so much stuff. See, that's the thing. There's so much stuff.
See, I think
shot
all of
here,
Child's Play is shot here.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. There's so many films that are. And actually, the interesting side note about what the people that play Blood in the Snow, I've been told by festival directors in the States that the quality of the films that coming out of Canada are a lot higher than a lot of the U.S. stuff that they're getting submitted. So if you look at a lot of the U.S. genre festivals, they're playing a lot of Canadian content. And my theory is why is that because we're basically Hollywood North, and all these shows like even Star Trek and Suicide Squad and Deadpool, all that stuff is shot up either in Vancouver and Toronto. And so what happens is that the people that are making the films that are playing Blood in the Snow are actually, their day job is being crew members on these shows. So for example, we had a film called The Unseen that played last year, and it was about this guy that gradually went invisible. And his day job is doing special effects for movies. So he was the main special effects guy for Deadpool and Star Trek. And his team was nominated for an Oscar, but he wanted to direct his own movie, so he went and did that. So this is the kind of the caliber of people that we're getting. These aren't just we do get a bit of everything. We do have the up and coming filmmakers. It's
not Mike and I decided.
I've got some ideas.
Movie in our basement.
Well, you know what? We get that too. It really does cross the board. That's what's really fascinating. I mean, we have films that are made for like a few $1,000s to a few $1 million that play the fest side by side. And and that's why it makes it so competitive to get in. It's not like, oh, I made a movie, I'm going to play it.
Right.
You know, it's a very tough call that we have to do every year for that. But that's my theory of why that too, because the technical component of it's so strong.
Now your build is a Canadian film festival. Has there ever been, or maybe if you're forecasting the future, will there ever be a time where you sit there and say, you know what, maybe I have to open it up a little more than just Canadian? Are you strict and kind of cemented that you want this to be a Canadian film festival only?
Yeah, something we've talked about in the past. I mean, like, do we want to branch it out? I think I would never rule out anything.
Sure.
I mean, I didn't even know I was going to be doing this 6 years ago. So who knows, right? I think, in fact, a colleague of mine, a friend, asked me in July of that year, said, did you ever want to start a film festival? And I went, heck no. Yeah. And 3 months later, I had the fest. So, you never know with that kind of stuff like that. I will say that if we ever decided to, if we ever got to the point, like, because you never know, if there was a dip in the industry and there just wasn't enough things to like that, maybe we would open it up and have it, we have talked at times maybe having I mean, this year, like I said, we opened up to international co-productions. But not that we had to, but we just wanted to have more things to pick from.
Sure, absolutely.
So I mean, I think if we did, I think theoretically, if we did, we would always have like a massive Canadian component of it, and it wouldn't be like other festivals where the Canadian stuff was a small part. That part I can guarantee you. But you never rule anything out.
Because I think if you like the genre, which I do, it means at some point that you like being scared. I think for anyone going to the genesis of why that's attractive to you. And so that's why sometimes even the more unbelievable, there's a buy-in factor that I think you have to have. There's nothing worse than sitting with someone who starts predicting what's going to happen a couple of minutes. I'll make my own horror film by bringing my own chainsaw, and I'll sit beside that guy, and a head's being severed. What makes, I would say, necessarily even the line of what would be called the horror genre? For instance, if I'm looking at Hostel, or I'm looking at Saw, are those called horror films necessarily?
Oh yeah, actually, I mean it's they have like there's like subgenres of it that would be under the category of torture porn, like that.
Torture porn.
That's actually the terminology.
Oh God, I like that. I really do.
But having said that, most of the films actually that we get are anything like that. I mean, we and there's very few films that we play with a guy in a mask running out with a knife. I think maybe year one we had one that was like that. But really, for the most part, and what we constitute a horror film too is a very large umbrella. We've actually stretched it more and more. We've even played films that are like we have one of the films we have this year is a full-on action film. We have we're open to sci-fi films. We've had what I call dark dramas. We had a film called Kidnap Capital last year that was actually about illegal immigration into Phoenix, Arizona. It's known as the kidnap capital of the world, and they were trapping people in their basement and saying, unless you give us $3,000, we're not going to let you out.
Phoenix has this reputation of
they're known as the kidnap capital of the world because of that.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, and it was it's based on real like a real issue. Like it was a dramatic film, but it was based on real things that happened, and these are like true stories of people that happened. So there's an example of what I call real life horror that we've also branched into that too. So we definitely have stretched it. We kind of refer to ourselves more as a genre festival than a horror festival now,
right?
Because of that.
Yeah.
And I think and this kind of relates to what you're saying about expanding kind of thing like that too. I think that's kind of more the area that we're looking at now, is that we're kind of more expanding into like what would constitute a horror film. I think in the first couple of years it was probably a bit more rigid, and then now we're kind of like, wow, we're getting these great films. I mean, like we should try and find a place for it. And we played a film called She Almost Burned a couple of years ago and actually won Best Picture at our fest, and that was another one that was a little left of center. It was just like about religious fundamentalism, and they were like burning people at the stake for like that too. Again, based on a lot of crazy real stuff and fanaticism. And again, we fit that in, and we didn't know. I was reluctant to play it that year because I was like, I don't know if our base is going to like that, and it went over extremely well. So I think people like to. I think the thing that the common link with all that is like isn't so much as they want to be scared or grossed out. I think it's like they want to see interesting underground, unique stories, and and things that are kind of like a little. That aren't predictable and a little less, that's not the mainstream thing that you're going to get in the Cineplexes.
Gotcha. Kelly Michael Stewart joins us in studio. He is the founder, director of Blood in the Snow Canadian Film Festival, November 23rd to the 26th at the Royal Cinema. That's 608 College Street in the heart of Little Italy here in Toronto. So going back to your first fascination with this sort of film, when did you start loving it? Was this something that as a kid that you were immediately attracted to, or did this happen in your teens, or what was the first instance that you sat there and you went, oh, I love this and I want more of it?
Yeah. Geez, it's hard to detect which one. I think probably the first one that really hit me in a big way was Poltergeist. That one was really kind of and it was neat about that. It was made around the same time as E.T. Steven Spielberg produced it. Yep. Tobe Hooper directed it. But it was interesting because that movie, it was a PG film technically, because no one actually dies in that movie, and so like that. But it's scary as hell, right?
Yeah,
I found the little American midget woman. That's what's freaking me out.
Yeah. She's
there's something going on here. I was like,
yeah. No, it's
Ew.
like that. And I think that one really drew me in, and that and The Shining. But I think the thing that really drew me in the most was I really was obsessed with Vincent Price and the Universal horror movies like Frankenstein and Dracula.
So really classic.
Wow. I kind of came from that school of it, and I have to admit I don't think I. So I was much more into the Edgar Allan Poe stuff and stuff like that. That's everything before Night of the Living Dead, and then and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So 68 to 73, whatever, kind of like that is like that was kind of the transition where the modern horror kind of came in, and the modern horror stuff didn't really hit me I think until my 20s. I think that's when I really started, and I think watching those films and realizing, wow, there's a lot more to it. Like using the George Romero example, I mean, all 6 of his Living Dead films, there's a subtext to it. It's not just zombies walking around kind of like that too. I mean, Dawn of the Dead is about commercialism and talking about consumerism. It all takes place in a mall.
You know who's in that? People go, well, who could possibly, as I said, Attack of the Killed Tomatoes, George Clooney.
Mm-hmm.
George Clooney was in, maybe it was both of them. And the guy who plays Phil Dunphy in Modern Family is in the George Romero Dawn of the Dead. Mm-hmm. He's one of the guys who's stuck in the mall, because I think, did they shoot that in Edmonton?
No, are you thinking about the remake or the original?
Maybe it's the remake.
Yeah, there was a remake as well that had Sarah Polley in it.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, that was the remake. That was the remake one. The original films were all made in Pittsburgh. The first 3 films were made in Pittsburgh.
Okay. So I saw the remake.
Yeah. And then, but interesting though, and it's interesting, right geographically where this show is being broadcast is actually where George Romero lived for 15 years.
He lived there.
He just died recently, and he made his last 3 films here in and around Toronto.
Oh.
So if you watch Land of the Living Dead with Dennis Hopper,
Yep.
if you go into like the Path and like that too, there's a thing called Fiddler's Green that takes place. That's the main
Right.
fortress of the.
Yeah.
That's just like in the Path for like Bay Street and like that. It's just like that too. And so both Diary of the Dead and and Survival of the Dead, his last film, they were all shot in and around Toronto and stuff like that. So it's kind of like so Toronto does have that. I know people who worked on the films actually. It's quite incredible.
The psychological films. So again, you talk about the subdivisions of horror. So was it When a Stranger Calls? Is that when they have the masks on and they don't say anything? Okay, those ones I watch them and they drive me nuts because I'm like, go upstairs, get a stick. My son's like, what is no, I'm in the film now. I'm planning what I would do. Get some gasoline, go to the roof. You always got to go to a high point. Get like a golf club. Take the end off, sharpen it.
Yeah.
And
well, it does have an impact on how people behave because
you go crazy watching those things.
Yeah, because my mom says that she's always locked the door to have a shower. And like I remember as a kid going like just wanting to get like my toothbrush or something, and then she's like, why do you always lock the door? It's like it's because of Psycho. Yeah. It's just like I mean it really has these things do have an impact on how we behave. Right?
Well, that story scares me for other reasons. I got to be honest, Kelly.
Yeah.
Maybe that's another genre. I don't know, but I'm getting scared.
Yeah.
And I just think that and Dave and I were saying before you came on, you don't just like them. You love them. And therefore, when you're looking forward to, once Hollywood gets a hold of it, a major sort of film release that's going to be horror, are there those that you have been waiting for, and let's say and it can be cultish at times, that fan base is waiting for, and it comes out and people go, oh my God, that was terrible. That wasn't even close. Is there any that come to mind that should have been so much better, and then they get released and you're like, oh, that was so disappointing. I was waiting for that, and
there's
they
too
blew
many
it.
to even list.
Yeah. What ones were a tank for you, and not even necessarily box office wise, just for those that love the format, that maybe they had an idea, or maybe it was taken from a comic book or an author, and then it finally comes out and you go, boy, that wasn't even close.
Yeah. Oh, geez, I'm trying to think of off the top of my head, but I mean, I think the biggest one really is the usually the remakes. I think the remakes tend to kind of like they tend to really they tend to be I don't know, just derivative and kind of like that too. And I'm not really a fan. I tend to avoid any of the remakes. I didn't, I couldn't care less about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remakes, and I couldn't care less about.
Like, is Rob Zombie big in the format? Because of course I told the story that when House of a Thousand Corpses came out, I was the second voiceover guy. So all my, I did a lot of voiceovers at that time.
Yeah.
But I never got to be the guy who said, "This is my big line." Yeah. Starts in theaters Friday, and then we're like, "That's great." I'm like, anything else? Yeah, give us a. Starts in theaters Friday. This kind of stuff. And I was like, I walked out. I thought I was the, that was the greatest guy in the world.
Yeah.
But Rob Zombie, because of what goes through his head, and the with White Zombie and the psychedelic aspect of what he does musically, had some, the House of a Thousand Corpses wasn't for everybody. And, you're waiting for that happy ending.
His stuff divides people. I mean, I would say the film. I like his Halloween remakes. I personally like them. Those films divide people more than anyone I know.
Really?
People get angry about those films, and they really get upset about it. And same with Devil's Rejects. People either love that film.
I do. It's upsetting, but I love it.
Do you have time? Do you have time for a Rob Zombie story?
We can talk. Yeah. I tell you, we've been looking all. Once he told me you were coming in, I was looking forward to this the whole time.
Okay, so
by the way, the Dodgers won last night 3-1. Is that what you're interested in? Fine. Now back to the good stuff.
Okay, so I was lucky enough to be at the world premiere of Lords of Salem with Rob and Sherry Zombie were at it, and it was at Midnight Madness. And the way Midnight Madness parties work is they have their cast and crew party or whatever before the screening because it's at midnight. So we were at a bar at 10 o'clock, and Rob Zombie and his wife come in, and they were friendly, and I say hi and like that, and we pose for photos, and I could tell he was nervous. I'm just like, it's just like, are you looking forward to the screening? I'm just like, nope. And it's just like, okay. And then I talked to Sherry, and she just started going, like, shaking her head, like, no. Like,
she would scare me even if I met her in real life just because of the role she plays in those movies.
Oh, she's a sweetheart.
And if she started doing that high-pitched giggle, I'm like, I'm out of here, man. Because she's really good in those movies, and she scares the shit out of me.
Yeah. And no, they were both really friendly, but they were both nervous. And and he comes across this on TV and his videos and stuff as such a confident guy. I'm
Yes.
like, why is he so nervous?
That
And,
surprises
and so
me.
I'm in this weird position at this party, reassuring him that his premiere is going to go well, and I of course no one had seen literally no one had seen this movie yet, and because it was the world premiere, and I assumed the film was going to be like the Halloween movies or House of a Thousand Corpses. Like I had a certain idea of what a Rob Zombie film was, and he basically Lords of Salem is like 2001 on acid. Like it's but a horror movie of it. It's an art house movie, and so I was trying to reassure him that it was going to go well, and my argument was, oh, it's a very rowdy crowd. They'll be cheering through the whole thing like they generally do.
Yeah.
And when I went to the screening, 20 minutes into it, the reaction to it actually was I thought was quite good, but it's not a yell and cheer kind of movie. So like within 15 minutes of the film, I think people realized it's not that kind of movie, and they kind of quieted down, and the rest of it. And the next day, I got to interview Rob, and so I saw him again the next day, and he said to me, he told me, he said, now you see, that didn't reassure me about the rowdy thing, because it was an art house movie, and he was paranoid about showing it at that kind of crowd. And the thing was, and he didn't even tell his investors really what the story was really about. If you read the original synopsis on IMDb, they completely shot a different movie than when he told them. So he was also worried about all the investors in the audience seeing a movie that they didn't know that they were really invested. Because that was one of my questions: is like, how did you get finance for this movie? It's like,
but I think that's a historically, sort of accurate way of looking at how movies get made. Because I watched that Betty and Joan feud that they'd put on, where they go through Joan Crawford and Betty Davis, and it was Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Yeah.
And you looked at why they were put in that film at the time, and you looked at maybe how out of the box it was a little bit, especially for Betty Davis, and you start getting back to the origin of why make this film. What is the film supposed to be? Well, it is a horror film. I've never seen it.
Yeah,
it's
a fantastic movie. Yeah.
It looks scary. Like it does.
It is kind of. Yeah, I mean, Betty Davis. I mean, I think it's a career-defining role. I mean, I think like that. I mean, it's funny. I think I knew her as an older actress, obviously with my age, kind of like that. Then as a younger,
we all did. Sure.
Yeah, we all did. And then it's like needing to go back and like, oh, she was like a beautiful leading lady. I had no idea. Like it's just like that was interesting. But at the time,
Shelley Winters apparently was good in her time too, and I just don't see it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, different kind of.
There's a reason the Poseidon sank, and I thought it was because of her. I'll be honest. Sorry, you were saying.
You should watch her in Night of the Hunter. There's another one that's kind of like a horror movie.
Yeah.
Like that. Watch her on that. It's fantastic. But yeah, no, that movie is like that too, because it really is, because there's a great example of taking something and making that you think it's going to be a certain way, and then making it subversive. Because here's someone that you would never expect, like Betty Davis, to be anything but glamorous, and then have her as this cackling old Biddy in it, kind of like that. I'm like it was just so shocking to see that, especially if you know where she came from in Hollywood and stuff like that. I mean, it was just it was bold. I think it was a bold move for both those actresses to do that, because the last thing you want to do is show yourself as being unattractive,
right?
And being and look, they would just go out of their way not to. It's like when you watch old movies and there's been a tornado and they still got their makeup and hair perfect. I mean, that's the actresses not wanting to look bad because they think it's going to ruin them getting future parts, right? So it was a huge risk at the time, them doing that, even though they were getting older. I think that's probably was it. I'd say, well, screw it. We're not getting the roles now anyway.
So the Blood in the Snow Canadian Film Festival takes place November 23rd to the 26th at the Royal Cinema on College Street. Before we say goodbye for this morning,
because I have to ask you a horror movie question. But you know what? Let's do this before you get to that. Right?
I was just going to ask him tease some of the films.
We'll tease after, because I want to know what, because I've never asked this question of you, though the years we've known each other. Here comes the creepy music in the background.
Creepy music in the background. Okay.
What movie, whether it's supposed to be in that genre or not, what movie still scares you? What scares you as a movie? You watch it even tomorrow night, and you're scared. Because I got a couple, some that really, as a 54-year-old man, shouldn't be that scary, and yet still terrifying.
Man, that's. Can you pass it to Kelly while I think?
Do you have a movie that scares you? I mean, you've
The
seen
one,
it a lot.
I'm going to confess, the
Yeah.
film that made me scream like a little girl
Yeah.
was the last shot of Carrie.
Carrie was a scary movie.
Yeah. Because you know what? It was, but you know why? Because it wasn't. Sorry, I'm gonna wreck it for you now. But it was 90 minutes of it. Basically, it was a high school drama. Like really, nothing really scary
Until the
happens
end.
Until the end, and then that last 30 seconds of that film, I had relaxed because sometimes when you go into a movie, you know you're gonna be scared, so you tense up and you're waiting for that thing to jump out of the closet. Brian De Palma is such a genius that he wore me down to the point where I was just watching obviously with the supernatural element to it, but basically
Travolta was in it.
Yeah. I mean, but it was like really, I mean, until they go to the dance, it's really just it's most of the film is just a story about a kid trying to fit in, and boy, did I have my guard down that movie.
And so it's, even to this day, that will scare you. That movie.
I remember there was a retro screening of it a few years ago, and I watched it, and I mean not to the same degree it did the first time.
Yeah,
it never does, but it was just like, but still, it still has that jolt. I mean, it's a. Yeah.
I think okay, my love of horror movies, scary movies, whatever you want to call it, doesn't quite get into the same category as you guys. So I'm not going to sit there and even try to compete with that. But I guess as a kid, just seeing. And I know this is, probably lame compared to some of the other answers.
But sometimes lame movies that people say, like, it depends on what you're afraid of.
Well, the thing is, the first time, and you got to remember when you saw him, I was a kid when I saw Freddy.
Boy, you're really setting this up.
First time.
Oh, it's so okay.
When I see him for the first time, and the whole premise of that movie, it was like. It was kind of like,
you know what? That one did it for me too.
I
just had a memory, like I went blank when you were asking me a little bit, like what was the one kind of that. And I just wow. It
see,
just
like
hit me.
I'm in my 40s now,
Yeah.
so I look at that and go, okay, haha. Or Jason with the little gold mask. It's that's cute.
But at the time, we're about the same age, and it's just like that was one of the first time. That was the first time when I saw that much blood.
Yes.
That was the first time when I saw blood dripping from the ceiling.
See, like this guy watches blood movies daily. I'm surprised he's not part of your festival.
Yeah.
It should be part of the festival.
Yeah.
My life is a horror story.
Well, I'm definitely going to have you both this year.
Oh, we're there. You can count it. We're going to be there.
Yeah.
I look at this, and especially this aspect of it.
Yeah.
And still, because you have stuff like this. Those wrong turn movies freak me out. Every time people go, hey, do you want to go camping? No. Especially in the hills somewhere, like you just
even when you're with the good-looking girls,
but that's not good.
Yeah.
But the sounds they make, they don't quite talk. They go in, there's a refrigerator full of this stuff. They're hiding under the grounds, and guys are going. I'm like, my wife's like, I can't believe we're married. Like I seriously don't know how this is working.
Yeah.
That freaks me out. Anything to do with that, except I think by the time they got to wrong turn 7, get a GPS. Like seriously, stop.
Yeah, really.
And then they had like weird guys on motors or on skidoos or something, and I think it kind of lost its southern charm a little bit.
Yeah.
But then there's other things like I saw it the other day. That Planet of the Apes when they're cornfield, and the first time I remember as a kid, and they zoom in and they see the gorillas and there's. I was like. Babes, I was just it freaked me out. That movie freaked me out. It still kind of gives me the creeps.
Well, that's it. I think anything that's happened at the first, I was talking about my fandom of old Universal horror movies.
Yep.
Apparently, when those films, when they showed like dirt getting thrown onto a coffin, that was shocking to people. That had never been seen before.
Yeah, sure.
People were not used to seeing like things like that. Why would dirt onto a box? That was very, very gory.
Well, the shower, the psycho scene. I'm sure the censors were not wanting to see that.
No, exactly. It was completely unheard of at the time. I mean, that was really, and you could argue that was the birth of modern horror. It was like
I think it's a great point.
That really was a big moment.
You shouldn't be scared at Rumpelstiltskin, and yet maybe it's the little people. Maybe that's just what I don't like. I mean, the Wizard of Oz, I'm not a fan of for the same reason.
Oh, I think those flying monkey
monkeys
things, that still freaks people out.
That combines the Planet of the Apes with the.
There you go.
People say you shouldn't say midgets, but what are you supposed to say? Small
damn
people,
dirty
I guess?
apes.
Yeah, damn dirty apes. Yeah. See, that's where they blew it in the new ones.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, like the humans are being chased around. They're like, "Hey, has anyone got the time?"
Yeah.
Why are the humans talking like that? Like, what is the whole thing was when he talked.
Right.
That was the big surprise.
Yeah.
But no,
Well,
it's
it'll never be the original. Will never be topped.
no. Well, as you said, remakes very difficult to do, especially a significant and historically famous series like that is difficult. Well, we're thrilled once again. The 23rd to the 26th at the Royal Cinema, so Little Italy. So if you want, you can get a nice dinner beforehand.
Early bird passes are available.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. Yeah, you can go to bloodinthesnow.ca and you can click on the ticket link there right now, and early bird passes are up there. And it gets you that pass gets you into everything the whole weekend long, and it's a really great deal. It works out to something like $7-8 a screening, so it's really
That's really good.
Yeah, we keep it really affordable, and then we'll have we'll be at Horrorama November 4th, and that's where we're going to announce our entire lineup, and all our tickets are going to go on sale that day. So so it's $11 advanced and $13 at the door, and so it's a fantastic event.
Now, you don't dress up like Vincent Price or anything, do you? Do you dress up in something scary? do you come out like holding your head or something weird, or?
Well, I dress pretty dapper. I mean, for it. I mean, this jacket where I'm wearing now is usually my standard uniform. I do have a leopard jacket that scares people a little bit sometimes. There's a couple. I have to admit, there was one. Relating back to sports stuff. There, it's like I did see Don Cherry wear a jacket a few months ago. I go, I have to have that jacket for Blood and Snow. Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, we will. Come on here. Here we go.
There we go.
There.
What? You just become best friends? Yep.
Yeah, this was good.
Do karate in the garage?
Yep.
It's time.
So once again, it's Bits. If you want to look it up, certain Twitter handle is at BITS Film Festival.
Yes.
And of course, go to its website itself, the Blood in the Snow Film Festival. You can get the early bird, which I would suggest doing. I mean, if all of a sudden you're seeing those kinds of movies for $7-8, you can't get anything for $7-8. So make sure you do that. Kelly Michael Stewart joined us here today. It's November the 23rd to the 26th. Thanks for coming in, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're going to be there.
All right.
Starts in theaters Friday. Sorry, couldn't help it. Rumpelstiltskin!